Mick Jagger, more than just a rock star, he's a cultural icon. But beyond the music, the sold-out arenas, and the untouchable fame, another story was unfolding, one of uncertainty, legal battles, and paternity disputes that lingered for decades. For years, speculations swirled around his ever-growing family tree. Rumors, lawsuits, and whispered doubts followed him offstage, as questions about his role as a father remained unanswered. The tabloids had their theories, the public had its opinions, but the truth was elusive until now. With modern DNA testing, long-standing mysteries have finally been put to rest. Who are Mick Jagger's rightful heirs? How did these revelations reshape his legacy? And what do they reveal about the man behind the legend? Today, we separate fact from fiction and uncover the DNA results that changed everything. In the whirlwind of the 1960s and 70s, Mick Jagger wasn't just leading the Rolling Stones, he was living the ultimate rock and roll fantasy. His rise to fame was fueled by a never-ending cycle of sold-out concerts, global tours, and high-profile romances with some of the most famous women of the era. From actresses to supermodels, Jagger's personal life was as much a topic of conversation as his music. And with that lifestyle came consequences. Consequences that would follow him for decades. In 1970, actress and singer Marcia Hunt gave birth to a baby girl, Karis Jagger. But instead of a joyous announcement, the event was met with denial, legal battles, and relentless speculation. Jagger, at the height of his fame, kept his distance. He wasn't ready for fatherhood, and the idea of acknowledging a child out of wedlock could complicate his public image. For the media, it was the perfect storm. A rock star embroiled in paternity controversy, fueling endless rumors and front-page headlines. Despite Hunt's insistence that Karis was Jagger's daughter, he reportedly refused to acknowledge her, offering little to no support. His silence only deepened the mystery. Was he truly unsure of his role in her life? Or was he simply avoiding responsibility? Some saw it as an act of self-preservation, a calculated decision to maintain his rock star mystique. Others saw it as abandonment. But Marcia Hunt wasn't about to let the issue fade into the background. Frustrated with Jagger's unwillingness to step up, she took legal action. The case was messy, drawing more media attention and further tarnishing Jagger's carefully curated image. Without the luxury of DNA testing that we have today, legal proceedings relied on documentation, testimonies, and negotiations behind closed doors. At first, Jagger continued to resist. He wasn't eager to be tied down by legal obligations, and the rock and roll lifestyle he had built for himself didn't leave room for fatherhood. But as the case progressed, the pressure mounted. The courts ruled in Hunt's favor, legally establishing Jagger as Karis's father and requiring him to provide financial support. Even with the ruling, Jagger's acceptance was slow. It wasn't an immediate embrace, nor was it the warm family reunion some might have hoped for. But as the years passed, something shifted. Karis, who had spent much of her early life distanced from her father's world, gradually became more connected to the Jagger family. Her presence at family gatherings, her inclusion in significant moments, these were signs of a relationship that had transformed over time. By adulthood, she had carved out her own path, avoiding the limelight of the music industry and instead pursuing a quiet, independent life. Looking back, Jagger's initial reluctance to acknowledge Karis wasn't just about evading responsibility. It was about control, privacy, and the fear of losing the persona he had worked so hard to build. In the world of rock and roll, fatherhood wasn't part of the fantasy. And yet, no matter how much he tried to distance himself, the truth had a way of catching up. The saga of Karis Jagger set a precedent. one that would repeat itself decades later, this time with undeniable proof. Because by the late 1990s, DNA testing would remove all doubt, and Mick Jagger would once again find himself at the center of a paternity scandal. Only this time, the evidence was indisputable. In the early 1970s, Mick Jagger's life took a turn that appeared, at least on the surface, more traditional. In 1971, he married Nicaraguan socialite and actress Bianca Perez Mora Macias in a high-profile ceremony that captivated the press. With Bianca, Jagger welcomed his second daughter, Jade, in 1971, a child born into a very different set of circumstances than his first. Unlike his initial reluctance with Karis, Mick publicly embraced Jade as his daughter from the start. She was raised in a world of luxury, traveling between continents, attending high-profile events, and living the life of a celebrity child. Her mother, Bianca, was an activist and socialite, a stark contrast to the reclusive Marcia Hunt, who had battled for Jagger's recognition of their daughter. To the outside world, Jade was the daughter Jagger had no hesitation in claiming. Her presence in his life was widely documented. Family photos, interviews, and red carpet appearances all painted the picture of a father who was present and involved. But this created an uncomfortable contrast. If Mick Jagger could publicly acknowledge Jade, why had he been so distant from Karis? Was it a matter of love, or was it simply about optics? Bianca Jagger, despite the glamorous image, was not blind to her husband's infidelities. Their marriage was turbulent, with constant rumors of affairs and indiscretions making headlines. By 1978, Bianca had enough. She filed for divorce, famously stating, "My marriage ended on my wedding day." While their relationship dissolved, Jade remained a visible and accepted part of the Jagger family, unlike Karis, whose legitimacy had been questioned for years. But Mick Jagger wasn't one to stay single for long. As his marriage to Bianca unraveled, he was already entering a new chapter, one that would shape his family more than ever before. Enter Jerry Hall, the woman who, for many, defined Mick Jagger's longest and most stable relationship. A statuesque Texan supermodel, Hall met Jagger in 1977, while he was still legally married. Their chemistry was undeniable, and soon she became not just his partner, but the mother of 4 of his children. Elizabeth, James, Georgia May, and Gabriel were all born during Jagger's decades-long relationship with Hall, creating what many saw as his first real attempt at a family unit. Unlike the fleeting romances and scandals of his past, this era saw Jagger as something different. An aging rock star with a growing family, balancing wild excess with fatherhood. Jerry Hall brought an undeniable sense of structure to Jagger's life. While he continued touring and indulging in the temptations of fame, Hall maintained a home life that appeared more grounded than his previous relationships. Family photo shoots, interviews, and a carefully curated public image suggested Jagger was evolving, at least somewhat, into a father who was more present. But was he really? While the media portrayed Hall as the stabilizing force in his life, Jagger's reputation as a womanizer never faded. Affairs continued to make headlines, and his name remained synonymous with rock and roll indulgence. The growing number of children only added to the public's fascination. Was Jagger an involved father? Or was he simply a man who provided financial support while continuing to live on his own terms? For many, the answer seemed to be both. By the 1990s, Mick Jagger had fathered 6 children with multiple women, and the press had a field day dissecting the complexities of his personal life. Some saw him as an absentee father, someone who was present in name, but not in the everyday realities of raising children. Others viewed him as a man caught in the chaos of his own fame, someone who, despite the dysfunction, still held an undeniable connection to his ever-expanding family. But just when it seemed like his days of paternity scandals might be behind him, the late 90s would bring yet another revelation. One that would change everything. Because this time, it wasn't just rumors or legal battles. This time, there would be proof. And Mick Jagger would be forced to face the truth in a way he never had before. In 1999, a scandal broke that would send shockwaves through Mick Jagger's personal life. Brazilian model Luciana Gimenez Morad gave birth to a baby boy, Lucas. Almost immediately, the media erupted with speculation. Was Mick Jagger the father? Or was this another case of tabloid exaggeration? For Jagger, this situation was different from the past. Decades earlier, rumors and court battles had determined the fate of his first daughter, Karis, without the certainty of modern science. But by the late 1990s, technology had caught up with speculation. There would be no drawn-out legal debates, no years of avoidance. This time, the truth could be found in a matter of days. A court-ordered DNA test was conducted, and the results were undeniable. Lucas Morad was, in fact, Mick Jagger's son. The test removed all doubt, instantly confirming what the press had already suspected. There was no room for negotiation or delay. Jagger was legally and financially responsible for another child. The timing of this revelation could not have been worse for Jagger's personal life. His longtime partner, Jerry Hall, had stood by him for decades, raising 4 children together and maintaining the appearance of stability in his otherwise chaotic world. But the confirmation of Lucas's paternity was the final straw. The scandal, the betrayal, and the undeniable proof were too much to ignore. Hall filed for annulment, ending their relationship once and for all. Beyond the emotional fallout, there were legal and financial consequences. With the test confirming Jagger's paternity, Luciana Gimenez Morad now had legal grounds to seek financial support for their son. Given Jagger's wealth and status, the case quickly became a high-profile matter. The settlement negotiations were intense, with figures circulating in the media that painted a picture of just how expensive Jagger's lifestyle had become. Reports suggested that millions would be allocated to ensure Lucas's upbringing matched the privileged life of his half-siblings. But for many observers, the question wasn't about money, it was about responsibility. Compared to Karis's early struggles for recognition, Lucas's acceptance was immediate. There were no denials, no drawn-out court battles, just the undeniable proof of a DNA test. This stark contrast raised questions. Had Jagger truly changed as a father, or had he simply been forced into acceptance by the irrefutable evidence of science? The public had mixed reactions. Some believed this moment marked a turning point, that Jagger had no choice but to embrace fatherhood in a way he hadn't before. Others saw it as another chapter in the same story, a rock star who lived freely and dealt with the consequences only when there was no other option. But no matter how the public viewed it, one thing was clear. Mick Jagger's paternity disputes were no longer a matter of speculation. DNA testing had removed any uncertainty, forcing the rock legend to confront the reality of his ever-growing family. And in the years that followed, it became clear that his role as a father, whether reluctant or willing, was forever changed. For decades, whispers and speculation surrounded the private lives of celebrities, with paternity scandals often turning into drawn-out courtroom dramas. Before DNA testing, accusations of fatherhood were met with denial, legal wrangling, and public controversy. Celebrities could distance themselves, dodge responsibility, or settle cases quietly behind closed doors. But as science advanced, so did accountability. DNA testing changed everything. It replaced rumors with certainty, transforming paternity disputes from prolonged sagas into definitive truths. No longer could fame, wealth, or carefully managed public images shield anyone from biological reality. With a simple test, lifelong questions could be answered in an instant. And Mick Jagger was far from the only high-profile figure caught in the wake of these advancements. In Hollywood, sports, and the music industry, DNA tests exposed secrets that many had hoped would remain buried. Legendary figures like Steve Jobs, Eddie Murphy, and even sports icons like Michael Jordan found themselves facing paternity allegations, some of which were confirmed, while others were disproven. For some, the tests offered vindication. For others, they forced a reckoning. The media, once reliant on hearsay and scandal, now had undeniable proof at its disposal. Beyond individual cases, the cultural conversation around illegitimate children also began to shift. Once stigmatized, these children were often hidden from public view, treated as inconvenient consequences of a celebrity's personal life. But as DNA testing erased ambiguity, the term illegitimate itself started to lose meaning. If science confirmed paternity, so too did society's recognition. These children were no longer sidelined. They were now part of the family, entitled to the same acknowledgement as any other child. For Mick Jagger, the evolution of paternity testing marked a turning point in his own journey as a father. In the early years of his career, uncertainty and legal battles shaped his relationship with Kris Jagger. Without DNA confirmation, it took years before she was fully accepted into the family. But by the time Lucas Morad was born, there was no room for dispute. Science had spoken, and Jagger had no choice but to recognize his son immediately. Over time, Jagger's approach to fatherhood appeared to change. While still maintaining his rock star lifestyle, he became more publicly involved with his children. He attended major milestones, posed for family photographs, and was seen embracing his role as a father in ways that would have seemed unlikely in his younger years. But had he truly changed? Or had the circumstances simply forced his hand? Some believed that age and experience had softened him, making him more willing to embrace the complexities of his personal life. Others argued that DNA testing had simply eliminated the ability to deny responsibility, leaving no option but to step up. Whatever the reason, the Jagger name had expanded beyond music, cementing itself in family legacies that now spanned generations. The rock star who once seemed untouchable was, in the end, bound by the same biological truths as everyone else. And whether he was ready or not, DNA had forced him to confront the reality of fatherhood, one test at a time. Even after decades in the spotlight, Mick Jagger proved that his story was far from over. In 2016, at the age of 73, he became a father once again. His partner, ballerina Melanie Hamrick, gave birth to his 8th child, a son named Devereaux. It was a moment that shocked the public, not just because of his age, but because it marked yet another unexpected chapter in his already complex legacy. For most, fatherhood in their 70s is unheard of. By then, many have long settled into the role of grandparent, watching the next generations take over. But for Mick Jagger, life has never followed conventional timelines. With a career still thriving, the question became, how would he balance being a father to a newborn while continuing to perform on stage in front of millions? In his younger years, fatherhood was often something Jagger seemed to keep at arm's length, an obligation that occasionally interrupted his rock star lifestyle. But this time, things were different. With decades of experience behind him, Jagger approached fatherhood in his 70s with a new perspective, one shaped by his past missteps, his evolving relationships with his older children, and an understanding that time was no longer on his side in the way it once was. Friends and insiders noted that he seemed more present with Devereaux, perhaps aware that his years as an active parent were far more limited than before. Unlike the whirlwind of the 60s and 70s, where responsibility often took a back seat to the music, Jagger now embraced the reality of fatherhood with a more reflective approach. There was no denying that he had slowed down, at least compared to his earlier years, but his commitment to his career had not wavered. Even with a baby at home, Jagger continued touring, proving that the stage would always be his second home. But while Jagger was welcoming another child, his family tree had already grown into something far bigger. His children from previous relationships had gone on to build lives of their own, forging careers, starting families, and in some cases, making Mick Jagger not just a father, but a grandfather. His eldest daughter, Karis, who had once been the child he hesitated to claim, had become a mother herself. Jade, his daughter from his marriage to Bianca Jagger, had given him multiple grandchildren, and, as his younger children from his relationship with Jerry Hall, Elizabeth, James, Georgia May, and Gabriel, found their own paths in the world, Jagger's role expanded beyond just being a father. Now, he was the patriarch of an ever-growing dynasty, with grandchildren and even great-grandchildren adding new layers to the Jagger name. Some of his children followed in his artistic footsteps. Georgia May became a successful model, James pursued music, and Gabriel explored various creative endeavors. Others carved out their own unique paths, preferring to step outside the shadow of their father's fame. For Jagger, balancing family with his relentless career has always been a challenge, but somehow he has managed to keep both alive. Even with his extensive commitments to music, he remains involved in his children's lives, attending major events, milestones, and celebrations when possible. But as time moves forward, the inevitable question arises. What will the Jagger legacy look like when the man himself is no longer at the helm? His children, his grandchildren, and even the great-grandchildren that will one day carry his name all represent different facets of his history. A history shaped by love, scandal, music, and, above all, the undeniable force of time. For now, Mick Jagger continues to defy expectations. Whether on stage or at home, he remains an unstoppable figure, proving that fatherhood, much like rock and roll, has no expiration date. But one thing is certain, his influence, both as an artist and as a father, will be felt long after the final curtain falls. For over 6 decades, Mick Jagger has been the embodiment of rock and roll, a legend whose presence on stage is as electrifying today as it was in the 1960s. But beyond the music, the sold-out stadiums, and the endless fame, another story has unfolded. A story of fatherhood, responsibility, and the complex relationships that have shaped his life, just as much as his time in the spotlight. Fatherhood didn't come easily to Jagger. In his early years, it was something he seemed to keep at a distance, a side effect of fame rather than a role he actively embraced. But as time went on, that role became impossible to ignore. 8 children, multiple relationships, and eventually, the undeniable proof of DNA testing left no room for ambiguity. Whether by choice or circumstance, Mick Jagger was more than just a rock star. He was the head of a sprawling family. Balancing fatherhood with a life of excess was never simple. Tours, recording sessions, and a never-ending cycle of celebrity distractions often took priority. But as his children grew, so did his willingness to embrace them. In interviews, Jagger has reflected on the difficulty of maintaining relationships with his kids while constantly traveling the world. He's acknowledged his faults, admitted to his missteps, and, in his own way, tried to make amends. And now, in his later years, that balance has shifted yet again. With a child born when he was well into his 70s, Jagger's approach to fatherhood has evolved. The rebellious rock star who once avoided responsibility is now a man who attends family events, supports his children's endeavors, and remains connected to the people who share his name. But what does it all mean for his legacy? Mick Jagger's influence on music is undeniable. His name is written in rock and roll history. But his story as a father is just as layered, filled with twists, challenges, and unexpected turns. His children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren will carry the Jagger name long after the final encore. The evolution of his personal life mirrors the evolution of fame itself. In an era where DNA testing can confirm or deny paternity in an instant, the days of speculation and rumors have faded. Celebrity legacies are no longer just about music, film, or fortune. They're about the undeniable truth of family. So, what do you think? Has DNA testing changed the way we view celebrity families? Has it reshaped legacies in ways we never expected? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and make sure to subscribe.